So I am Colette Lafia. I am a parishioner at St. Ignatius. I'm also a spiritual director, a retreat leader, writer, and a part-time school librarian. So this morning, because we are in the Lenten, so I'd like to welcome everybody. And as Lucy said, if everybody could just unmute for a moment and say their name, that is a way of coming into the group together. And so why don't you just do popcorn, just say, hi, I'm da-da-da from.
Hi, I'm Madeline Lafia. I'm from Santa Barbara area.
Welcome.
Liz Bias from San Francisco.
Welcome.
Monique Lafia from Pacific Palisades, California.
Welcome.
Jim O'Hara, Forestville in Sonoma County.
Welcome.
I'm Mary Clipp. I'm from San Francisco.
I'm Larry Seamy from San Francisco.
Welcome.
I'm Lucy Irwin from San Francisco.
And there's Mary and Kevin. Okay. Well, I'd like to begin by lighting this candle. And as I light this candle, I welcome all of us into this time together, because this is, I'm inviting everybody into sacred time and sacred space. So I really invite you not just to listen. This isn't me giving a lecture, but this is a time for us to pray together during our Lenten season. So we take a moment and we acknowledge that this is sacred space and sacred time. And we will be talking and sharing what is most important in our hearts, which is our love for God and for one another. So as we begin, I'd like us to do what I always call an arriving practice. And this is something I've been doing more in my spiritual prayer time, is taking a moment to arrive somewhere. And so I invite you, if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes or you can just gaze forward. And if you're comfortable, you can also mute your volume so that the background noise, people aren't hearing the background noise. So let's take a few minutes to gather ourselves and to arrive in this sacred space together. So as I said, feel free to close your eyes or softly gaze in front of you. Taking a moment to arrive here more fully. If possible, feel your feet on the ground and the weight of your body in your chair or on your sofa. Just letting yourself settle into this moment a little bit. Finding some ease in the body and the mind. I truly trust that God enjoys when we relax and come to prayer in a relaxed and receptive way. So just taking a moment. And now taking a few conscious breaths, being aware that you are breathing in, just being aware of that. Feeling your lungs fill up. Being aware that you're breathing out. And just do that for a few more rounds, in and out. More conscious of your breathing. And if it's comfortable and available to you, I invite you to allow your breath to deepen and to become a little slower, but don't force it. Don't force it. Just see if that can happen. A little deeper on the inhale and a little slower on the exhale. Now I'm going to invite you to bring your attention to your heart and feel the depth and spaciousness of your heart. Your heart is your home in which God is living and dwelling and breathing you into being at every moment. So just enter into the depth and spaciousness of your heart. Feeling yourself breathing in and out of your heart center. And as you continue breathing in and out of your heart, begin to sense the abundance of God's love pouring into you, pouring into you. Feel this divine love flowing towards you and into you, creating your very being. And then sense that love breathing out of you and pouring out into the world. And so breathing in God's love, the abundance of God's love, letting it fill you, and breathing that out, letting it flow out of you. And just take a few moments breathing that in, that abundance of divine love, and breathing out that abundance of divine love. God's love pouring into you and flowing out of you as the very essence of your life. And now for a few moments, let us just simply rest in the fullness of this love. And I'll ring the bell to bring us out of it. So to see if you can actually relax more into this. And enjoy the presence of God's love. So take a deeper breath in, and when you're ready, open your eyes and come into presence with one another. There's something in the chat. Okay. So welcome, everybody. It's so lovely to actually share with you some of my reflections from my new book, The Divine Heart. This is the first time I've done this because my book, the book is going to be published in May. So it's lovely to be able to share it with my community and my sisters like this so intimately as the first time I'm actually sharing it. And so I really wanted to start by, first of all, acknowledging that right now, many of us, I know myself, I mentioned I work in schools, that we are facing a lot of fear. And it was really reminding me how this last year of our lives have been really fearful time. You know, we have just going out to run an errand, you know, we're protecting ourselves all the time. And other people we're anxious, we're fearful. And now those of us who are being invited to go back into schools, even though we have the vaccine, there's so many variables, unknown variables that we're facing. And so the energy of fear is very palpable. And it's palpable for me, and it's palpable for the teachers that I'm around and many people. And I started to think, how are we going to move out of the forest of fear? And I started to realize it's going to be through the presence and power of love. And so what is love? And that is so much of what my book is exploring. You know, we grow up with the teaching, we shall love the Lord our God with all our heart and all our mind and all our strength. But what does that really mean? And how do we really live this love relationship? And so my book is really an exploration of that. And I wanted to start a little bit by just looking at the title, The Divine Heart. Sometimes when we hear the word heart, we immediately think of emotions. But I would like to introduce another notion of the heart, which is something that I have been introduced to in my studies in the last few years. And that is the heart as the spiritual organ of perception. And so our heart is the place in which we are integrated. Our heart is the place where our thoughts and our feelings and our being integrate. And it's also the place where we are known in God, and that we know God, and that we recognize that this knowing of God is something we were born with. It's already in us. And that's why so many spiritual teachers, they talk about the awakening, because it's not something out there that we have to bring into us. It's something in us that we just have to invite to open and to bloom. We are born with this knowledge and this spiritual intuition. So I'd like to really invite us, as we think about the heart, and I refer to the heart, is to think about it more as our spiritual center, that place in which I know that I am, I sense that I am, I feel that I am. So it's not splitting the mind and the heart. Sometimes how we think about the heart, emotions, our mind is our mind. No, I'd like to really see if we could look at it in a much more integrated way. And to see that it is the place from which we deeply listen to God's stirrings in us. And so I'd like to start with this quote. I'm going to just go to my PowerPoint. Here we go. So I'd like to start with this quote. Oops. This quote, which I love, which is by Mechthild of Magdeburg. She's a 13th century Christian mystic. And she writes, and this is in the beginning of my book, I talk about awakening to love. So this book is so much about like I said, it's so much about my journey of my relationship to love of God, love of self, love of others, and love of the living world. So really my exploration was, how do I live a deeper and more integrated sense of love? What is love? What is this love we're being invited to live? So that was really my question. And so I'd like to start with this quote by Mechthild. She writes, I desired you before the world began. So the I is God. So God is speaking to her in this. I desired you before the world began. I desire you now as you desire me. And where the desires of two come together, there love is perfected. So, as we hear, God so loved the world that he gave his only son. Gave. God so loved. So it's this love that God has for us and has had for us since the beginning of time, whatever that time is, infinite time, eternal time. And it's this desire, once we awaken that God desires me and awakens this desire for God in me. And there's a mutuality going on here. God is desiring me as I am desiring God. God is yearning for me as I am yearning for God. And where these two come together, their love is perfected. So I, over time, started really reflecting and saying, I am living a divine love relationship. This is what my life is. My life is love. My identity is love. Everything is love. If we think about how God pours out love, infinite love, and creates all things, creates us, creates the trees, creates the mountains, creates you. We're all created from this source of infinite love pouring itself out. And so how do we awaken to this reality that we are actually living inside of this love, as much as this love is living inside of us? And I truly believe this is what Jesus is coming to teach us, to awaken us to. We are not separate from God. We are not separate from each other. We all come and dwell and live in the same source of divine love, which is pouring itself out and manifesting all things at all times. So this desire, and I think a way to awaken more deeply to love. Originally, my book the title was Unfolding Intimacy. And then as things go in publishing, the titles get shifted and it became The Divine Heart. But it was Unfolding Intimacy. So how do we awaken to this deep depth of love that is inside of us? So, like I said, my exploration really began with this. So many times, right? This is what we're raised with. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength, and your neighbor as yourself. But for the beginning, I'll be honest, I felt my orientation really was about loving others. And so I actually returned to this for a while. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And I started saying, how do I do that? I know I do that through serving others, loving others, attending to others. But as I began to read more of the mystics and study the Christian contemplative path, I knew that this was also an awakening in my own heart that I was invited into. So how do I begin to do this? How do I actually live this love relationship with God? Well, the first thing was to really awaken to it, And I know that sounds, so obvious. And yet when I saw that, it was obvious and a revelation at the same time. So in my book, The Divine Heart, I explore 7 ways to live in God's love. Qualities of love that can be seen as invitations to uncover the depth of love and awaken to our connection and union with the divine and with everyone and everything else. So what happened for me is, I think, and for many people, I had actually reached a very sorrowful place in my life. And I was grieving something very deeply. And I was really searching. I was searching for a deeper depth of love. And I was searching for my identity in God's love. Up until then, I'd put a lot of my identity in accomplishments, in achievements, in being recognized. And some of that started to completely crumble and fail for me. And so I turned in another direction and I said, who am I really? Who am I? And then I began to explore myself as love, as a manifestation of God's love. And my yearning was, how do I love God more fully and more deeply? And so actually, in many ways, through prayer and through study, I arrived at these 7 qualities of love. And they're at the bottom, but let me see if I have another one. I'm going to talk about the qualities later. What I want to do now is invite us into a prayer. And what we're going to do now is we're going to practice what's called Vizio Divina. And so many of you know of Lectio Divina, which is reading quietly the sacred word. This is Vizio Divina. And I think this is such a lovely practice for us to engage in because, especially as Catholics, we see so many images, and images are really a part of our spiritual experience. In the Mass, in church, even every day every Sunday when we look at the altar, there's a large image of the cross. And so we can use these images as places of prayer. So I'm going to invite us into a Vizio Divina practice. And rather than us reviewing it, let's just do it. And then we'll go back to it. Okay. So I think what I'll do first, before we do it, is stop for a minute. And I want to read to you something. And then we'll do the practice. So as I was saying, that so much of my yearning was how to nurture more divine intimacy. So in this book, I write about a moment, an experience I had. And it goes, last winter, which really wasn't last winter because this book got delayed in being published. So I'll just say a few winters ago, the answer came. I'd returned home from a long day of work, then grocery shopping, and finally a last-minute yoga class. I sat on the edge of my bed, drained and ready for a bath, and I prayed, "Dear God, let me not forget that you are with me through all of this." So this is probably a very familiar feeling for many of us. You know, you're rushing, you're this, you're that, you're doing it all, and it's like, where is God? Where is God here? So I had a moment like that where it's just, I sat on the edge of my bed, drained and ready for a warm bath. And I prayed, "Dear God, let me not forget that you are with me through all this." As I slipped out of my clothes, my eyes landed on a single pink rose in a slender vase my husband had placed on the dresser. My gaze lingered, and I felt an invisible unfurling of something within me. In the stillness, my heart cracked open, and God's boundless love flooded my being. I knew I was returning home, to the place where the divine has always been and would always be waiting for me inside myself. Everything I need, I could see, is already in the beautiful bud of my heart. God's generous love is always there. We're born knowing this. And although we might forget, this is our spiritual heritage and our spiritual intuition. At that moment, I heard these words clearly within me. God is a love relationship. Like the rose on my dresser opening to the light, my heart was opening to the divine. This unfurling, like the petals of the rose, seeks and needs to open. That is its purpose and its destiny. And in that moment, it was both obvious and a revelation. We are, in every moment, living a divine love relationship. So I'd like you to just take that in, and I'd like to guide you through a prayer practice now with those words in your heart. So what I'd like you to do is I'll just guide you. So again, coming into this moment, because Vizio Divina is a prayer practice. Reconnect with your breath. Reconnect with your heart. And come into this moment. And I'm going to invite you to engage in divine seeing by allowing your heart and imagination to enter into one of the images as a sacred moment. So Vizio Divina is allowing an image to be a prayer experience. So again, working from the heart and bringing in this notion that God is a love relationship, and bringing in this idea that your heart is like a rose, a bud that opens. That's how God's love, it's like a bud that you're born with that opens and opens and opens and opens. So gaze at one of the images here, whichever image you feel drawn to. And when I mean gaze, it's soft. I know we're looking at a computer, but if you think about, there's two ways of looking. One is like you stare hard and your brain is trying to like interpret and name it. And the other is a prayerful way you gaze. So you might even want to see about sitting back a little in your chair. Notice if you're tense, let your eyes relax. And kind of just take in whatever image you choose. Just choose one. And gaze at that image just for a few moments, taking it in whole, not trying to find any meaning in it right now. Just take it in whole. Just kind of let it wash over you. Feel it, sense it. Perhaps in your imagination, you're smelling it. You receive the image. So this is a receptive way of praying with something. And you're looking at it with the eyes of your heart, as I was talking about earlier, your heart. So we're doing no interpretation, we're just being with something, receiving it, gazing at it. And after you look softly at the image for a while, notice if you're drawn to a particular portion of it. So as you're looking, you'll see something's going to draw your attention. Something's going to speak to you. The curve of the petals, the center, the color, whatever it is for you. Let your eyes, and again, your eyes of your heart, just dwell there for a moment. And allow your awareness to gently take in both what you're looking at and what's going on in you at the same time. Maybe any feelings, any thoughts. So you start to let it become an exchange. What's stirring within you as you look at the image? And how might this image awaken you to an invitation to enter into a more intimate and loving relationship with God? And sometimes when I do this, I close my eyes for a minute, then I might open them again. And just let it go back and forth very fluidly, like that flow from the meditation. How is God this Lent inviting you into more intimacy with divine love? And just stay with that for a few moments, and I'll ring the bell to bring us out. I'd just like to say one thing. Trust your own inner experience. This is so much of how we grow in the spiritual life, is learning to trust our own spiritual experiences and intuition.